shoulder, off!
Distinguished guests, please rise if you are able, as honors are rendered to the President and remain standing for the arrival of the President of the Republic of Kenya and Her Excellency Rachel Ruto, and the playing of the national anthems of the Republic of Kenya and the United States.
Present, earth!
Distinguished guests, the President of the United States and Dr. Jill Biden.
Right shoulder, earth!
On those images live from White House, you can see President Joe Biden accompanied by President William Ruto introducing him to his cabinet members. We can tell you confidently that Prime Cabinet Secretary Musalia Mudavadi is there, Treasury CS Njuguna Ndogo, his PS Chris Kipto, Trade CS Rebecca Miano, Environment and Forestry CS Soipantuya, Defense Cabinet Secretary Aden Duwale, NIS Director General that is Nurdin Haji, Economic Advisor to the President David Ndii, as well as the National Security Advisor to the President, that is Monica Juma, and a host of high-ranking government officials from Kenya. That was a small tete-a-tete with the Kenyan government, with the President leading and introducing President Joe Biden, now being led to the podium where we do anticipate the two leaders to be addressing both nations and the world. Let's listen in.
National anthem of the Republic of Kenya, followed by the national anthem of the United States. Distinguished guests, please be seated.
Mama tu hapa. Where do you want to go? Mama tu hapa.
Hold. Ready. Cut. Someone else. At each. Hold. Sit at each.
Distinguished guests, the President of the United States.
Good morning. Hold the rain off. President Ruto, Mrs. Ruto, and your three lovely daughters who are here to my left. Nice. Welcome, 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 welcome. And all the distinguished guests, on behalf of myself and Jill, Vice President and Second Gentleman, and the American people, it's an honor to welcome you to the White House to celebrate 60 years of partnership between Kenya and the United States. At the stroke of midnight, that's worth applause. At the stroke of midnight on December 12, 1963, the world changed. Many Americans and many people around the world watched with great hope and great anticipation as thousands of Kenyans came together, raised a new flag, declared their freedom, and gave life to a new nation. Ladies and gentlemen, that new democracy is endearing and enduring. It was a moment that forever connected our two nations. For while we may have been divided by distance, we were united by the same democratic values. I saw this during my first trip to Kenya as a young senator at the height of the Cold War, and watched our governments stand as one and prevail against communism. I saw it when I returned years later as vice president and spoke to students committed to upholding the principles of transparency, justice, and accountability that lie at the heart of our democracies. And I see it every day as president, as our two proud democracies continue to draw from the power of the people and the strength of our diversity to write the next chapter in our partnership. Together, the United States and Kenya are working to deliver on the challenges that matter most to our people's lives: health security, economic security, cyber security. Mr. President, bold leadership on this front has been important and significantly impactful. 90% of Kenya's electricity comes from clean energy. 90%. That's worth an applause. Over 1 million homes are powered by wind energy alone. That's worth applause, too. An historic Africa Green Industrialization Initiative, which you launched last year, is poised to create similar results in so many other nations, particularly in the continent. Across the region, Kenya and America are driving a race to the top with investments that we have and high standards for workers, technology, and environment. And we're working to ensure debt doesn't leave these critical investments and crucial investments out of reach for low and middle income countries. Around the world, Kenya and America are also standing united against the terror of ISIS and al-Shabaab perpetrate in East Africa, that they continue to perpetrate in East Africa. The aggression that Russia is inflicting on Ukraine, the violence that has toppled too many democracies across both our regions. And today, as we begin the next decade of our partnership, we've launched a new initiative to bring our countries, companies, and communities closer together, because the past is our proof that we are stronger and the world is safer when Kenya and the United States work together. Let me close with this. We stand at an inflection point in history where the decisions we make now will determine the course of our future for decades to come. Today, I'm as optimistic and hopeful as I was those years ago when Kenya patriots raised that new flag high in that midnight sky. Because Kenya and the United States stand together, committed to each other, committed to our people, and committed to building a better world, one of greater opportunity, dignity, security, and liberty for all Americans, for all Kenyans. God bless our partnership, and may God bless our troops. Thank you, thank you, thank you.
Distinguished guests, the President of the Republic of Kenya.
Thank you. President Joe Biden, Dr. Jill Biden, Madam Vice President, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, Jambo. Let me take this opportunity in a very special way to bring you warm greetings from the people, the government of Kenya, and your brothers and sisters across the African continent. I want to thank President Biden for extending an invitation to me to undertake this state visit, a sign of friendship and partnership and collaboration between two countries that share common values, values of freedom, democracy, rule of law, equality, and inclusivity. We are a very proud democratic nation. And today, as we celebrate our past, we are optimistic about our future. That by undertaking this state visit, we will have the opportunity to discuss and to have a conversation about building global partnership and leadership around the issues that pose challenges regionally, globally, and in countries like Kenya and many others. Challenges of climate change, challenges of insecurity, challenges around debt distress. And today we have an occasion to build synergies, to build partnerships that will not only solve our current problems, but also to build a future that is much more promising, much more prosperous, a fairer, a freer, a healthier, and a much more prosperous future. I am confident Mr. President, that a partnership between the United States of America and Kenya will give us the solutions that the world so seriously needs. And we will be discussing a range of issues from peace and security in our region, recognizing the heavy lifting Kenya is doing in supporting peace and security efforts in the Horn of Africa, in the Great Lakes region. And I want to say, Mr. President, we value the support, the friendship, and the collaboration the United States has given Kenya and our region to make sure that we undertake our responsibilities in securing our region. Mr. President, we will also be having the opportunity to discuss the investment opportunities, trade, and hopefully we will be able to persuade the United States to renew the Africa Growth and Opportunities Act that gives Africa the opportunity for access to markets so that we can create more jobs, we can create more wealth, and we can spread prosperity across our continent. And hopefully also we will conclude on our strategic partnership, on our strategic trade and investment partnership that will give us the opportunity in Kenya to work with companies in the United States and to build greater synergy around our continent on matters to do with trade, investment, especially as we put together the Africa Continental Free Trade Area and twin it with the United States, as we discussed at the Africa Leaders Summit last year, giving us an opportunity to build greater partnership between the continent of Africa and the United States. Mr. President, I know that our menu of discussion is broad and wide, and I am confident that under your leadership, we will be able to build a freer, a healthier, and a much more prosperous Kenya, United States, and for people around the world. Thank you very much.
Distinguished guests, please rise if you are able for the conclusion of the ceremony and departure of the official party.
Mr. President, this concludes the ceremony.
Well, that was a short ceremony there at White House before the two heads of state retired to have a discussion. They clearly stated that their menu is wide and they need to consult more, especially when it comes to matters to do with insecurity, climate change, development and investment opportunities between the two nations. Remember, this visit marks 60 years of official USA-Kenya partnership. The last time I told you a visiting head of state from Kenya went to the United States was back in 2003. 2 decades later, another head of state has been able to be ushered in to the corridors of White House in Washington, D.C., the United States of America. Now, the brief ceremony included national anthem from both countries, also a 21-gun salute accorded to President William Ruto. They reviewed the troops, listened to the musical troops review, and then finally made brief remarks to what they will be discussing on, and later on they'll be coming back to tell us more what they have been able to agree upon. Now, the president, let's start off with Biden. He has accorded Kenya not just a state recommendation, but congratulated them on their independence and democracy that is shared between the two nations, clearly stating the only thing that is different between the two nations is distance. But when it comes to democracy, both countries have been able to uphold that. And of course, he has also talked about battling terror cells, not just in the Horn of Africa, but ISIS in the Middle East. And of course, both nations working together to eliminate such threats from their neighboring countries and protecting the sovereignty of their borders. President William Ruto clearly stating that they will also talk about climate change. You do remember from the back of the African Climate Summit 2023, where we saw the officials, not just from the United States of America, but other parts of the country coming to the Kenyatta International Convention Center to have that particular discussion. And when it comes to climate change financing matters, President also tackled on issues to do with insecurity, debt distress and other matters. Now, given that the president clearly stating that we need to look for solutions on peace and security, given that Kenya is lifting the heavy load when it comes to protecting not only the East African region but the Horn of Africa, the president also clearly stating on trade matters they will have to renew the Africa Growth Act on trade so that Kenyans and Africans alike can access markets abroad, create job opportunities, and of course create wealth for their nation, working with companies in the United States and of course ensuring that they boost matters to do with trade and revenue when it comes to working with all those nations. Now, briefly, the two heads of states have retired. They will be coming back to tell us more on what they have been able to agree upon when it comes to their bilateral talks. Now, right now, we can confidently tell you our government is there, that is led by Prime Cabinet Secretary Musalia Mudavadi, the Treasury CS Njuguna Ndugu, Treasury PS Chris Kipto, Trade CS Rebecca Miano, the Environment and Forestry Soipan Tuya, Defense Cabinet Secretary Aden Duale, the NIS Director General, that is Nurjin Haji, Economic Advisor to the President, that is David Ndii, and finally the National Security Advisor to the President, Monica Juma, are all present for that particular meeting. We'll be taking you there live once they come out and they'll be able to agree on a number of issues. But the major thing that is coming out of this particular event for the last 4 days that President William Ruto has been in the United States of America is that Kenya will become the 19th country to be named a major non-NATO ally, with the most recent addition since Biden bestowed that particular title to Qatar in March 2022. If you have not heard me clearly, Kenya will become the 19th country to be named a major non-NATO ally, the most recent addition since Biden bestowed that particular title to Qatar. This means the U.S. is not a treaty bound to come to such countries' defense, as it will be the actual NATO allies, but the designation, according to the State Department, it will provide certain benefits in the areas of defense, trade and security here in the country. This memorandum of understanding will expand the Madna Bay airfield in the coastal part of the country, in our country that is, building a runway of 10,000 foot and expand the facility that provides Kenya the required infrastructure to increase operations against the terrorist terror cells such as Al-Shabaab. Kenya is scheduled to also receive 16 U.S. manufactured helicopters between the late 2024 and summer of 2025 to bolster its ability to provide regional peace and security and participate in peacekeeping missions, as we have done in a number of countries, not just here in the Horn of Africa, East Africa, but in other parts of the world. That is all we can tell you so far right now, but we're waiting for the two heads of state to come out once more to tell us what they have been able to agree. Once that is concluded, they'll be having a state dinner with Joe Biden, his wife, as well as President William Ruto and First Lady Mama Rachel Ruto, and a host of dignitaries from both sides, both the Kenya and the United States government, and we'll be bringing you that as well live. But to put matters into perspective, I already have guests here with me so that we can try to contextualize what has been happening for the last 4 days. What are the benefits of that Kenya has been able to receive, and how will it bolster some of the initiatives the government current administration is undertaking? Let me introduce a renowned figure here in our studios, Dr. Isaac Hassan, a governance expert. Daktari, welcome. Thank you. And next to Daktari, we do have Stephen Ouko, a law and governance expert. Welcome, sir.
Thank you.
And then on the farthest end, that is Dr. Shadrach Okindo, law and governance expert. I see you have worn your cap today.
Thank you.
Thank you, gentlemen, for joining us. Let me start with you, Daktari. What have you been able to gather for the last 4 days? We have been having our president in the United States, in Atlanta, Georgia, and now to the Washington, D.C. So how historic is this visit, not just for Kenya, but for the United States as well?
I think if you say what did you gather, I gathered a lot.
Yes.
Both negative and positive
Let's start with the positive
dimensions. And definitely I will start with the positive.
Yes.
When our flags are raised in foreign countries,
Yes.
we as Kenyans, we should be proud, because there are countries in this world who have not had an opportunity to achieve certain milestone that Kenya has achieved. You see our athletes go and they make wonderful thing in the world, and our flag is up, our national anthem is sung by other people. Now our regional president of Africa, the president of Kenya, has gone to the United States. I guess those are titles I'm just giving. That is to myself, but it's not a declaration.
Okay.
But from the way the president put or packages his agendas, I think he is worth being referred to as the regional president or an African president. That also has been seen from the time he left up to date, many people putting their words on his trip in terms of what packages are there. When we look at keenly the visit, it is both crucial for United States and it is crucial for Kenya as a country. In terms of United States will want to package their things in terms of their global control as a superpower, and have a basis or a ground where they are able to have a friendly government that they are able to transmit their messages as well as their powers, so that they are able to control the global dynamic of governance. On the other hand, you will find Kenya, which has gone into the limelight. I know all African countries, all Asian countries, and the globe at large are watching the steps of the president from the time he landed in America up to date now, when he has given out his brief speech and cleared out their agenda that they were going to discuss on a boardroom, so that we are able to come out with a clear outcome of their visit. And that's when we will talk about the issue of the gains and merits and demerits of the trip. This is the time when it comes. But don't forget, there are issues that also Kenyans echoed very widely.
Yes.
From not using our national carrier by the president and using another chartered plane.
Okay.
Perhaps we may criticize on that aspect, but I think by and large, looks like Kenya is heading the right direction.
Okay.
And I think with His Excellency Dr. William Ruto, looks like now we are trying to have quite a number of friends who will going to find one way or another in supporting this nation. And above all, I mean, when we go to bilateral discussion with other governments, the issue is always win-win. It is not basically benefiting only one side. And we will want to see what kind of win-win that the president will going to bring for this nation. As we know very well, US, their win is already very clear, that they want to have a center of control, particularly the Horn of Africa. And their concentration is basically on issues of security, issues of democracy, and issues of bilateral business agendas. So there are a number of things that will going to come out as we wait for the president to tell us exactly what they have discussed and what is it that they have agreed and what is it that they could not agree but have placed it in their agenda for next discussion. And that's a very great thing that I should say, that as the mother of, the motherland of the president of United States, who was the citizen of Kenya, President Barack Obama, I think today the implication is that we are having another Kenyan who is raising the flag of this nation in United States.
Yes, Mr. Oko, talk about that, because the last time our flag was hoisted in the United States, especially in the lawns of White House at Washington, D.C., was back in 2003 when the late Mwai Kibaki went there. So how significant is that for our country right now, especially at this day and age when countries like the United States and other countries are not even welcoming African heads of state to their countries?
Okay, that's good. One of the reasons is that during the so-called Cold War, Kenya was pro-America, and then we had the pro-communist. But later on, by and by, when those countries that were pro-America, as in Congo and other countries, were overthrown, America has been trying to find a footing and a strong partner so that it could consolidate control. And in West Africa, it has not worked well. South Africa under Mandela did not work well, and the post-Mandela presidents as well. North Africa, once Mubarak was ousted, so they have been trying to find a footing. And so when Kibaki came to power, they thought they found a soft man that they could work with. So when they went, did what he did, gave him a state visit, all the blah, blah, and everything. What they wanted to have a base along the coast, on the eastern side.
Yes.
And Kibaki had a call for it. He never gave them what they wanted. Now, about 20 years later on, they found a man whom they think will be able to accept and to work with them. That's why they give him a state visit. And you must understand that as we are talking now, the world, the pro-Americans, is shifting. They're shifting because there are people who are having onslaught on the use of dollar. There are people who are not happy with the American trying to impose so-called democracy and their social engineering, like the social life. So many countries are trying now to run away from America. And when they find a country like Kenya who can now again accept to do their bargaining in terms of the so-called security, in terms of businesses accepting BITs, what we call bilateral trade agreements, which actually is so designed to favor the big boys, as I call them, the Americans, because there are some clauses there that actually it's for their advantage in the long run. So the whole thing is, you look at it, and you must also understand that he was invited. He was invited, come. So whosoever invited him because he had his own agenda. And whatever he's talking, we are going to discuss this and this and this and this. It is Biden who called him and who has the agenda that he wants to push through. But in the meantime, you have to get some few crumbs here and there to make you feel good.
And don't you think even our president, he knows why he's being invited there, but at the long run, he will end up fighting for those issues? Because you've just heard him speaking there, clearly talking about that Kenya is carrying the heavy load in East African region, and the Horn of Africa when it comes to insecurity matters. So does it not make sense to ensure that Kenya is fully armed financially as well as equipment-wise so that they can deal with the terror cells such as Al-Shabaab?
Very good. You must understand that we are fighting other people's wars.
How so, Mr. Oko?
It is not our war.
Yes.
The issue of terror is not our war. We are
But
fighting
Al-Shabaab are
other people's war.
attacking our borders.
That's what people think so.
Yeah.
But actually,
Okay.
the terror war is in America and Western influence, and they are concerned.
Okay.
So we are just being used as a pawn in that game. It is not our war, and it should not be even our concern. But because we are now carrying this baggage of the so-called insecurity, and now is the Kenya now helping to, we are doing what they should be doing. And if any leader comes, he should say, I'm not going to be to participate, to be enemy of your enemy and friend of your friend. We are going to be non-aligned and to pursue our own interest.
Okay.
But once you identify, so we are going to do business and also we're going to fight your enemy, already you are going to get yourself mixed up and you are going to become a target. And in the meantime, they will say, okay, we need to arm you to keep you safer. So you have somebody watching over you as a nation, and that is wrong.
Okay, let me get the sentiments of Dr. Shadrack here. Daktari, welcome and tell us your opening remarks. Also, briefly touch on what Mr. Oko is talking about, because the president has necessitated that particular point, that given that Kenya, we are surrounded with countries, would say, in conflict zones, especially what is happening in Ethiopia. We have the Horn of Africa. We also have the Democratic Republic of Congo, where Kenya was among the ICRAF battalion that was helping them in combating some of these gangs. So are you for the idea that when the president is speaking to POTUS there back in Washington, they should focus on issues to arm Kenya so that we can able to protect our sovereignty, our borders, but the region at large?
First of all, I want to echo our one and only Dr. William Ruto. Many people called him, baptized him, His Excellency. But today, I am really calling him Son of Africa. He makes us to be proud of as an Africans. Now we are not looking at ourselves as a Kenyans. That's number one. Number two.
Okay, Daktari. We'll come back to you. I do hear we have a technical glitch with your microphone. Okay. We'll be sorting that out. I'm coming back to you. Don't worry. You'll repeat all those pointers you've just said. But let me come back here to Daktari. Daktari, you've just heard Mr. Oko is saying. So the question is, given that we are trying to not just protect our borders, but we're also protecting the region at large, given that we host many armies here in Kenya. For example, Batuk, we do have them in Laikipia, in many other parts of the country, so that we can protect not just our borders, but the East African region at large. Should the president necessitate on this particular matter when they're having that discussion?
I think one thing that is very important that each and every Kenyan must know is that terrorism is a global phenomenon.
Yes.
And no one is safe. And that has been proved by the number of attacks that we have got in this country. You know the Duset, you know the, what do we call the other?
Westgate.
You know the one American Embassy in Cooperative Plaza.
Yes.
So it is not that something that is exclusive for Westerners. The fact that you live with people who are willing to go and attack or destroy, peaceful living or coexistence among the community, it is a global phenomenon. One, the fact that Americans play a very great role in fighting global terrorism does not necessarily mean that this is a threat to only America. It's a global thing that affects everybody. So I think it is a good idea, it is a great thing to see that the president must first clear out that, because where there is no peace, there is always no development. There is no growth in society. But one thing that Kenyans will always want to say is that if you de-associate yourself from those who are targeted, and you put yourself to be one of the cleanest society in that particular country, the end result is that terrorists don't have systematic, military way of attack. What they do is that they cause what is called provocative attack. They come to your country, attack foreigners whom they have interest in specific other countries, and then once they attack, you will not be exceptional because you will also your countrymen will also be affected. They are not in isolation, and if we put ourselves in isolation, for example, we say no foreigners should come here so long as you are a target of terrorists. Then means we are not now living in the societal global village, but we will start isolating ourselves. In essence, we will be useless in the society if we don't come out and say that this is a global phenomenon and it should be something that is inevitable. It will going to affect each and every person. I mean, how many Kenyans died versus Americans in the American embassy attack? Kenyans are the losers. They were only around 7 Americans who were killed in that attack, but over 200, 300 people were killed in our own country. So the fact that the magnitude of that, or the magnitude and the impact of that attack will not going to forgive the residents of that particular country, and we cannot control as a country to have people who have been assumed to be targets of terrorism from other countries to come into our country, then it means that then we have a common obligation, and in any way that we are able to contain that situation and attack the situation and also collaborate and help each other in terms of containing terrorism activities, that is highly welcome. And I agree with the President that this is a primary thing that he should discuss with America, because much of the attack globally assumed is that terrorists will like to attack Americans, not America, Americans. And that means then Americans who are living in any of the countries in this world are targets of terrorism. On that note, the country that they live in is also a target for terrorism. And on that note, Kenya is a target for terrorists.
Okay.
And therefore, the President, I think, has all the obligation and blessings from this nation to go and cooperate with America and any other nation that we think will going to sanitize the effect of terrorism in this nation.
Okay. Dr. Shadrach, let me now allow you to have a bite of the cherry. Now you can tell us what you were telling us initially, especially tackling on matters to do with insecurity, where the President has necessitated on that point in his brief opening remarks.
Yeah, thank you very much. As I said before, that when we're talking issues of security in the Republic of Kenya, we are not exercise so-called the rebel movements. Since the independence, we are taught to practice democracy in our country. And that's why many foreign countries, they are so interested with Kenya. Look at our boundaries, neighbors, that now the doctor is talking about. Because we are conducting humanity, and we are protecting humanity against ourselves. Therefore, for His Excellency to be in United States of America, talking with his colleague, it is also to make the African to be the peaceful continent like Kenya. And therefore, if you want to make other countries in a peaceful sentiment, you must to interact with the so-called country which has been there for decades without violence, without rebellism, So I think that America has more interest with Kenya because of the peace sustainability. And that peace, they cannot get it in Congo. They cannot get it in Uganda. They cannot get it in West Africa. They will get it from here because charity begins at home. I can't advocate peace while I'm supporting the rebel groups or Al-Shabaabs. And therefore, I think those are the biggest issues that His Excellency is going to table with his counterpart, His Excellency Biden. Yeah.
And indeed, if you just joined us, this is a wall-to-wall coverage of what is happening over 13,000 kilometers away on the south lawns of White House in Washington, D.C. What we're talking about is some of the issues President William Ruto raised in his brief remarks that he made a while ago, especially when it comes to insecurity, especially on the Al-Shabaab terror attacks that we have witnessed in the past and how we can contain them, and with the support of the United States. As I told you, this is a major thing because Kenya will become the 19th country to be named as a major non-NATO ally, the most recent addition to be bestowed that particular honors. The Qatar was the last country to receive that honor in March 2022. 3 countries on the African continent have also been bestowed this particular initiative, where Egypt, Morocco and Tunisia have already gained those status. Now Kenya becoming the other country in the African continent to gain that particular status, a major non-NATO ally. It comes with a lot of benefits, especially on the Memorandum of Understanding. It will be to expand the Manda Bay airfield in the coastal Kenya by building 10,000-foot runway and to expand the facility that provides Kenya with the required operations against terrorist groups such as Al-Shabaab. Also, Kenya is scheduled to receive 16 U.S. manufactured helicopters between late 2024 and summer 2025 to bolster ability to provide regional peace and security and participate in peacekeeping missions within the country. Now, President Biden has also asked Congress for funding in the financial year 2025 budget that will enable $36 billion in the new lending at the World Bank, that together with a contribution from the international partners such as the World Bank could provide an additional $100 billion to the World Bank financing capacity over time. Now that is the other issue that President William Ruto has been able to touch upon, given that for the last few years since he has taken office in August 2022, President William Ruto has been pushing African heads of state to also push for reforms in financing architecture for multilateral leaders such as the IMF and the World Bank. They agree with President Ruto that debt levels in Africa are choking economic developments and welfare. Let me come to Mr. Oko. President Ruto has been advocating for this, to come up with a multilateral lenders financing architecture so that this, not just the International Monetary Fund, but other countries that we're borrowing from, does not choke us to the extent our economies are deprived. With President William Ruto there, will that be an issue of precedence, especially when he's speaking to President Biden?
Not really. IMF and World Bank was set those years after the Second World War under what we call at Bretton Woods and what is known as the Washington Consensus. At that time, you see, World Bank and IMF are shareholders. And these are banks that are supposed to make profits for the shareholders. And as far as it is concerned, they are doing their business. They have to do business. They have over 10,000 plus employees who has to be paid from the profits. So the issue of pushing for reforms and other lenders is good. That's a sound bite. But the owners and the directors of these institutions sit down and decide how these organizations are going to be run. And once that is done, they give them the chief executives to do the implementation. I don't see that having agitated for that is going to make any big impact. And for your information, if you look at the IMF and the World Bank critically, there's no single country that I know that has ever been lifted out of poverty and debt by the funding of these institutions. Most of the countries that have been gone out of economical woods have done because they rejected their proposals. But once you get into the mire and you think that these countries are going to get you out, you'll find yourself being indebted more and more and more. And in the end of it, you'll find that you're not able to sustain yourself economically, and then you'll start to depend on them for your productivity. For example, we are saying, fine, we are going to get more loans from the World Bank, Ever since he came to power, he has borrowed about 4.5 trillion Kenya shillings. This is money they are going to pay. And from the outlook of our economic survey, we are not getting better by the day. So it means in the future, with more borrowing from these institutions, we are going to be worse or bad, or from bad to worse. That's the scenario. But from the face value is that by giving us this money, Kenya is going to get better. It has never happened. The countries that came out of the debt, which were like Greece, Italy, and Spain, and Ireland, they refused the austerity measures that were put in place by this institution. So I'm not optimistic about getting more funding from them, or just trying to say that we want reforms. The only way, if you want to get reform, then you either join BRICS.
Okay.
Yes.
Let me go to Daktari. I know you are itching to respond, but preview to what Mr. Oko is clearly talking about, this current administration at least returned a portion of what they had owed the International Monetary Fund. And that's why we saw a little bit of change when it comes to our Kenyan shilling against the dollar. And when it comes to debt distress, the president is talking about not the countries that are more powerful than us, they have more resources than us, they should not take advantage of us. But right now in the country, with the changes we have witnessed in the country, the president announcing that we are out of debt distress, we've even seen other countries in the African continent defaulting on their loans. Now, given that Kenya has not done the same, is this a nice pedestal we could stand on when we're talking to the
Allow me just to correct one point. Just correct. Then, no. Just correct just one point. We borrowed and repaid.
Okay.
So we are not out of this. We borrowed to pay. So the debt still stands. Thank you.
Okay. Go.
To me, I'm not agree with my colleague here.
Yes.
Because we have to give a credit where it is necessary.
Yes.
Okay. If you remember the last regime and the regime which is in the place right now, there is a very big, huge difference. Because for Mr. Ruto, I'm thinking of something that is not just a minister. Is not just a president, but is an economically strategy master. Because to him, is looking more of how Kenya can overtake other international countries, other foreign countries. Recently, when you hear very well about His Excellency, he said that so far we have 12% tax. And he said within his period of governance, he wants to leave Kenya at 24%. I don't know if you understand me. At 24%. This is the man who has Kenya at hand. He wants to reunion Kenya more than the person whom every time we worship and we praise the, how do you call him, the late Mzee,
Mwai Kibaki.
Mwai Kibaki.
Yes.
Okay? His Excellency Ruto is a genius. And many people will not understand his way. But later, they will understand that this man was not only for ruling the country, but it was for bringing something benefiting for the generation to come, for our children to our children, so that economically we can stand without borrowing anyway. And let me tell you, all African presidents, since the independence, the only person who break the record is only Dr. William Samoei Ruto. Give me the example. Which presidents that have been welcomed the way Dr. Ruto has been? He has made us to be proud. And I want to tell Kenyans that that game of calling names to His Excellency, let them now trying to look at why Dr. William Ruto wanted to be a president of the Republic of this country. For the interest of the Kenyans, not his interest. Okay? last year, people were complaining about the high cost of living in the Republic. But now people starting to realize that life is coming better and better and better. And you know, His Excellency being in United States of America, for example, in my region where I'm coming from, Coast Region, yeah, we are now going to start receiving the tourists. Yeah? The industry of the tourism is going to explode. Yeah? People are going to come. So the gentleman is doing something for the sake and for the interest of his citizens. Yeah.
Okay. And let's just take this small story before we continue the conversation. I'm coming to you back, Daktari. Now, the president, while in the United States, especially in Washington, D.C., visited a number of areas on his final day as the head of state. He has been able to even had a meeting with the Congress leadership. That is the speakers of both houses. And, of course, that is where he was able to make a case for not just Kenya, but Africa. Let's get to hear from our very own George Jacob Kuria, who prepared that particular package.
The second day of President William Ruto in Washington, D.C. will be activity-packed. Before heading out for the official reception in White House,
Thank you very much.
Ruto will meet the 44th President of the United States, Barack Obama. Ruto will be accorded a full state reception at the White House by the host before retreating for bilateral engagements.
Well, ready, close, ready, shut, ready, base.
Several areas of cooperation to deepen relations between the two nations beyond the 60 years of cordial relations will also be signed. The president met his host on Wednesday at a tech roundtable in White House. Both the leaders underscored the need for allocation of more resources and support in the digital space to expand economic opportunities in Kenya.
And Mr. President, one very important aspect is the CHIPS Act, which hopefully we will be able to have a conversation about in the coming days. And Your Excellency, it speaks to the wealth of opportunity that exists between Kenya and the United States. Our young population, talented, educated, innovative, and American technology that is cutting edge, and investment capital and investors that are hungry for opportunities, not just in Kenya, but in our continent, is a perfect match for this moment.
In return, I think, as I said, we're going to prioritize the technological partnership between our countries, and our former CEO, who was also a former CEO, is going to make sure that happens. And Vice President Harris is already building a new public-private partnership to increase investments in innovation. And because our cooperation matters, it's not just for our own people, but for people around the world. If this relationship continues to grow as it is, I think it benefits not only the United States and Kenya, but will lead and will have positive benefits literally around the world.
President Ruto also met the Congressional Black Caucus, where he rallied them to support Africa's quest to overhaul the financial architecture of multilateral lenders, claiming debt was choking emerging democracies in the continent.
Kenya has been a true leader. Your country's dynamic and well-educated workforce is already contributing to economic growth through innovation and increased trade ties with the United States.
Today, countries like Kenya borrow in the financial markets 8 times more in interest than other countries. And that is the case for most African countries. We are saying the Congressional Black Caucus, this great institution, the American Congress, should lead the way in making sure that the international financial architecture, the World Bank, the IMF, multilateral development banks, are fashioned in a manner that gives every country a chance to borrow concessional resources so that we can develop our countries and we can deal with the effects of climate change, of floods, of droughts. And that no country spends more money servicing debt than paying for healthcare or education or social services for their citizens.
To further the agenda of reforms in the World Bank and IMF as sought by Africa, President Ruto also engaged House of Representatives Speaker Mike Johnson and Senate Majority and Minority Leaders Chuck Schumer and Mitch McConnell.
We're really grateful for Kenya's partnership in opposing extremists around the world and partnering together to oppose Al-Shabaab and the jihadists.
Kenya and the United States share common goal, and we share common values of freedom, democracy, rule of law.
He also met the International Conservation Caucus Foundation, led by U.S. Senator Chris Coons, to discuss climate change and what the Congress can do to aid Africa's climate adaptation agenda.
It is no longer fashionable to look at climate change as just a problem. It is also an opportunity. It is an opportunity for us to invest. We want to transit Africa from being the great potential it is into opportunity and into investment. And we need the necessary partnership to be able to achieve that so that we can manage the effects of climate change.
Conservation is one of the best investments we can make between our nations, that by leveraging the private sector, we can accelerate conservation. It is a key policy tool that cannot be matched by other competitors globally. And Senator Graham and I are working with dozens of other members in the House and Senate to advance what John just mentioned, the U.S. Foundation for International Conservation.
As is tradition for heads of state or any special guest of a U.S. government, President Ruto and Mama Rachel Ruto laid wreath at the Arlington National Cemetery to pay respect to America's fallen soldiers.
Lest we forget, that was yesterday where President William Ruto arrived in Washington, D.C., and upon his arrival, he was accorded a ceremonial state honors, and later met that congressional committee that you were seeing. A delegation held a discussion at the great Capitol Hill. Now the president, of course, with the U.S. Congress leadership rally, both houses, back in Africa's reforms agenda in the financial architecture. That's why you heard the president clearly talking about countries in Africa should be allowed to get concessional resources abundantly so that they can combat not just the effects of climate change, but to boost infrastructure and development. The speakers, Mike Johnson of the Senate and leadership of Charles Schumer, later addressed the Black Caucus. That was the event and itinerary of the president. Lest we forget, it was capped off by President William Ruto and Rachel Ruto, who laid a wreath at Arlington Cemetery to honor the dead American soldiers and historic figures, and later was received by his counterpart, that is Joe Biden. If you're just joining us, this is our wall-to-wall coverage of this 60 years of a friendship between Kenya and the United States. Both heads of state were able to address members of the Fourth Estate as well as the whole nation and the whole world when it comes to the partnership between the two countries and what they can do in their various regions and accompanying their various continents as well. Before we took that particular story, we were talking about debt distress, and the president has clearly touched upon it yesterday and even today. That's why I want to come to you, Daktari. The president talking about the architecture we do have in terms of the international borrowing scheme that we have in the world right now does not favor third world countries such as ours in the African continent. So despite stressing this particular issue, are we foreseeing that it could be solved when it comes to the conversations that we are having here right now with the IMF and the World Bank when it comes to the architecture of borrowing, given that the president clearly states that we need to get concessional resources abundantly?
Abdulaziz, first and foremost, I think it is important to know how IMF and World Bank was packaged before we think of borrowing and, of course, changing changing their way of doing their business in favor of African countries. I think the bottom line is that those institutions were designed in a manner that they will be in a position to control institutions or governments through economic empowerment, and of course suppressing of countries' resources if the country does not sink to their tone. The initial formation of IMF and those was a way to find suitable in controlling African countries or countries that are not part and parcel of those institutions.
Mm-hmm.
Now, time has gone and things have changed. Countries who are able to now generate their own resources and are able actually to run their basic errands,
mm-hmm.
other than massive resources that is meant for development. They're able to run their own, current expenditures.
Mm-hmm.
And that way, then the game of IMF and these other banks, World Bank, needs to be changed. And what the president is saying is that if your design earlier on was not in the context of the way our status is now,
mm-hmm.
then it is time for you guys to change in order for us to benefit from that resources in building our nations.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, these are not handouts. They rarely give out grants. And if they give out grants, they give it out for specific interventions, projects that are beneficial to specific quotas. It's not that they give resources out to national coffers so that the government is able to utilize that resources and plan it for their priorities, basing on their priorities, so that they are able to deliver what they are expected to deliver. The concept of IMF and World Bank is structured in a manner that you are given resources based on specific agendas that are of interest,
mm-hmm.
and those agendas are funded. For example, you'll find IMF funding water boreholes or funding, sanitations. You will find them funding a road between an infrastructure between a certain location to another location.
Mm-hmm.
The resources does not come in the pool of the government, so that the government says, we have got this amount of money from IMF, and then we use, based on our priorities, we use these resources to strive in building our nation.
Mm-hmm.
This is the thing that I think the president is trying to echo, is that your approach is not favoring anybody at the moment. In Africa, we want something that favors us. Why? We want the priority of utilizing resources from those institutions be priorities designed by the nation itself, not a priority where you are being given a piecemeal on specific agendas that the IMF or International Bank will want to fund it. Now, coming to your point, where you put very critically, will this be an easy thing?
Mm-hmm.
I think one thing that I've liked with the president in his visit is that he's no longer, the agenda is no longer for Kenya. He seems to buy the attention of United States leadership that a problem of Kenya is a problem of Africa. And therefore, if our problem is the same, then can you address this issue from that perspective, so that when Africa benefits, the fact that Kenya is an Eastern Central Africa economic hub, they will be in the forefront in benefiting from the design and architecture that will be changed. So the concept that he's trying to use is that in a certain proverb from my homeland, they say, ask for a camel and you will get a cow. And therefore what he's trying to do is that he's trying to magnify the need of Africa, to narrow it into perhaps them saying, yes, we may not pick up the whole African agenda simply because we may not have that interrelation or collaboration with some of them. But on this aspect, those allies of yours in Africa, plus those who are our allies, will come together and we will be able to address their issues in the manner that they will going to benefit from IMF and World Bank packages.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's a very good approach.
Mm-hmm.
And that approach favors several factors, in that Kenya will be making Kenya will be having an opportunity to sit in that particular forum in designing the architecture of how financial institutions in Africa should be managed and designed in order for it to favor the African agenda. And therefore, if you have been given forefront to come and sit and tell us how do you want it in terms of these institutions to address the issues that you are trying to raise for Africa, then you will be having an upper hand to put your point very clear and also design it and put it in a manner that you are going to have it in a favor of, more in a favor of African nation, but precisely for Kenya. And therefore I think the approach is fine, and most likely this will going to yield result. But again, as we know very well, diplomatic relations and international collaborations have also their own demerits in terms of request and acceptance. What happens is that perhaps they may come out very clearly and elaborately put their issues on the table. But how the recipient, perhaps the American leadership, will going to receive and weigh the benefit versus the gain that they're going to have over those agendas that they have been requested to partnership with, will going to be determined by their own system. And it is their system that will going to tell them that this issue or this particular step we're going to take may not be of much beneficial to us. On that note, the president will not have much control over the system of America. And therefore, Biden will just have to say that for this one, we will not be able to pick it up at the moment. But for those things that has already been discussed, has already been reflected on, and has already been weighed in terms of benefit versus gain, I think those are things that will going to be right on. Let you not, Abdaziz, I think diplomatic issues are not discussed on these cameras.
Yes.
Diplomatic issues have already been discussed before even the president landed in America. It's all about now putting it and contextualizing it into paper so that everybody reads, understands, and then endorse their signatures. It is not that it is this discussion which will going to create a new agenda that will going to be absorbed in that system and then will be discussed and agreed upon. These discussions on issues of diplomatic relationship and collaboration has already been addressed and discussed. And this is something that will go now to reality.
Yes.
So for those issues that earlier on were not reasonable or were not of beneficial to any of the two countries, this has already been dropped, both entities. But again, we are on the weak end, whereby sometimes the superpowers demand some agendas that they want to be fulfilled in the country that they want to collaborate with. And therefore, sometimes because of our weakness and because of the needs that we have at the moment in our nation, we may be compromised actually to not decline some demands over what you will going to gain. For example, I saw in the social media, I don't know how fact it is at the moment, the president has already signed a deal that will going to extend an expressway between Nairobi and Mombasa.
Yes.
And in that expressway, I mean that if it is a public-private partnership, like the way our expressway in Mombasa Road is, then it will be of beneficial to all of us. And we are able to pay for that simply because it is something that will going to expand our services and will going to benefit the users and provide gains within the shortest time possible as soon as it is finished. And if that such things are agreed, perhaps the demand from US will be accepted, because that will be a very big, significant project that this nation will going to benefit, and our children and our great-great-grandchildren will going to see when our nation has been transformed.
Yes.
I'm just landing from Rwanda, and when you see Kigali, the way it has been designed, Nairobi is not anything. But what has happened, I think the more you design your city, the more you improve and enhance your infrastructure, the better in terms of economic value that your nation will going to make. And we may not very much depend on loans from banks once those infrastructures are in place. and we are able to do things for ourselves and deliver it within ourselves.
Okay. And initially what you were just witnessing on your screen earlier on, it was the U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken, as well as the U.S. High Commissioner to Kenya, that is Meg Whitman, and a host of high-ranking government officials from the United States government, as well as Kenyan officials as well, walking out of White House. And it means any moment from now, we do anticipate both heads of state to come out and tell us what they have been able to agree upon. Let me head over to Mr. Walker. We were talking about initially what the president was talking about, Renew Africa Growth Act on trade when it comes to the access to market, creating jobs and more wealth. The president clearly stating that we need to renew this act, especially for the African continent, so that we can open doors and gateways for investors, both nations. And you as a business person or as an entrepreneur, you have an opportunity to sell your produce or whatever services you're selling out there. So is this the right move for the African continent, not just for Kenya?
Yeah, it has been always the right move. Unfortunately, our past and present governments has never taken initiative to promote local investors. What happens? We say we are going to expand the African free trade movement and free market to US, and then it's American or the foreign companies that come and set up shop here. And by giving them concessions on taxes, 10-year tax holidays, infrastructure like what we have in free, what we call export processing zones.
Yes.
I bet a bigger percentage of those companies are foreign. And because of the so-called cheap labor, what they're leaving to our people is like, it's just like to a slave wages. And for 10 years, we give them a tax holiday. We give them infrastructures. We give them permits. So it's just another way of coming, giving with the right hand and taking with the left hand. Until such a time when now they will encourage the local entrepreneurs and the local companies to set up so that the Kenyan products are the ones that are manufactured and sold in America or in Europe. That is when the country will be able to develop. Because what happened, the raw material comes from their country, it is made and then shipped and sold in their country, no taxes, no nothing. And part of the agreement in what we call bilateral international trade agreements is that they're supposed to repatriate 100% profit as soon as possible. So at the end of the day, there is no amount of money that is left for circulation or in the local market that you can go and borrow it. Once they are done, after 10 years, this company A camouflaged and now saying, okay, I'm going because I'm not making profit. He comes in the name of company C. And then the same concession for 10 years for tax holidays. After 10 years, the same company comes in the name company C, the same directors. So at the end of the day, the Africans or the countries that invite these companies are exploited dry. And there's nothing tangible. After all those years to say this company came, after 10 years, 20 years, we can see improvement in terms of human capital, in terms of monetary, in terms of infrastructure. That is the disadvantage. It's good for us, it's good for the president to say we need the extension of AGOA. But we have to engineer it so that it benefits us. That is my take.
Dr. As you respond to that as well, the president also touching upon that we need to also work with companies in the United States, especially in the Silicon Valley. We have witnessed this particular administration touching upon when it comes to digital matters. That is how the president clearly states that through digital, we are able to employ many youths who can be able to work from their homes and access many companies who are digitally woke right now, given that technology advancement and all that. So in terms of working with these particular companies, what is the area that we will likely to see the president focusing upon, touch it upon with the digital superhighway the government currently is focusing on?
First of all, as an African, we need first to seek the independence. We need to be an independent governance, whereby when we are investing, the investors we make sure that 90% remains to our people.
Mm-hmm.
But this so-called that we are inviting the investors, we are prouding that the investors are here, but they are taking, they are going. I think this cannot be workable at this generation where we are. Therefore, we have so many youths who had learned in terms of digitalization, have degrees, but they don't have jobs. So if this is the idea whereby His Excellency is interacting with his colleague in the United States of America, we need an independent body that we as an African, we as a Kenyan, we benefiting from what they are investing in.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. And that one will build us economically, physically, and also generation to come will benefit based on what His Excellency they have attached or they discuss or they signed to be done in Kenya and Africa at large.
Mm-hmm.
Because Mugabe talked about this. Kaguta talked about this. Kagame talked about this. But there is no implementation. Now what we want, yes, they have agreed in terms of bringing the digitalization technology in Africa, especially in Kenya. But what are we getting? Are they bringing all this equipment here, their technology here? Then they are putting us to be their slaves? We say no. Mm-hmm. Enough is enough, and we need African to governance as an African so that we can also sit with them and we negotiate with them.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. Dr. Coming back to that, we even heard the president, right now this current regime is focusing on shipping even human resource abroad. Are we likely to see them talking about this, given that the government aims to talk about over 250,000 workers every year be sent abroad so that they can at least bring back revenue when it comes to diaspora remittances?
Abdulaziz, there are pros.
I'll be coming to you, Mr. Oko. I've seen you shaking your
Yeah.
head. We'll have a right to that as well.
Abdulaziz, there is pros and cons of both ends when we talk about shipping of labor force outside the country. I think it is important that our youth who are graduating from the universities, colleges, whom we are not able to sustain in terms of employment, get opportunities in other countries. That would be of help in terms of changing the life of individual youth. Yeah. And therefore, when we are exporting manpower, then just know that the move has a bit of advantage and disadvantage. What is the advantage? The advantage is that the individuals are able to access the global market, get employed, get, of course, skills that are taught in modern society, not going to a place where Kenya's level of civilization is less, and therefore they are going to advance environment or society where they're going to have, they're going to enhance their skills and, of course, gain significant experience. And of course make money as an individual. If that happens, then of course...
yes, you can see inside, Daktari. Those are live images from White House, inside the White House. You can see the head of state. We're anticipating both of them to coming out. Yes. They are preparing to come out. As I told you initially, they only had a small briefing outside the South Lawns of the White House, but inside the White House, that is where both heads of state will be able to tell us what they have been able to agree upon. We've touched on a number of issues, from creating a conducive environment for investors in the country and of course abroad as well. We've also touched on the climate issue. We'll extensively touched upon that as well. We've even talked about transporting our human resource to other parts of the country so that we can bring back revenue remittances when it comes to diaspora. A number of issues there, of course, celebrating 60 years of friendship. Now, as we have those live images inside the White House, Mr. Oko, as you respond, as we have these live images, we're talking about shipping human resource. In the country, you do know that unemployment is high, and the president clearly stating that a way of solving this unemployment crisis in the country is allowing our bright minds to be able to work in other countries. But at the end of the day, we are looking at revenue remittances that will be made through the diaspora initiatives we have in various nations across the world.
Yeah, that's a good, it's a cry for a desperation. And it is a move and thinking of a disparate nation. The greatest wealth for any nation is human capital, is human resource. Once you get this human resource, you harness them, they become a human capital and then become human assets. Once you start now sending your human asset outside to go and build the economies of other countries, that is a danger sign. At the end of the day,
but are we not benefiting at the end of the day?
We are not benefiting. What happens is, it takes us about how many years to train a doctor from primary school to until he becomes a doctor? We are talking about 25, 30 years. And with a lot of billions of money, millions of money on him. We send him to go, earn good money outside, $4,000 plus.
That is tax.
He will be sending, sending maybe a maximum of $20 to the parents to sustain them.
Yes.
And the rest he will be keeping in those countries.
And how about remittances to the government?
That's the remittance. That's what I'm talking about. The remittances. And they will be and they are unlikely to come back, because once you have worked abroad on the greener pastures, you cannot come again here where our doctors and the professionals, the lecturers are running in the streets because of mismanagement and without respect. They are gone. So what's happening? You are depleting your resources. Let me give you an example. It's like now, the company that came to Kwale for titanium mining, it was worth billions. They have already done their thing. The land is depleted. They are gone. So what we have is what? Just a land without the mineral. This was going to happen. Never anticipate your young people going out to be employed because you have failed to provide for them.
Yes.
That is, the leadership is supposed to create employment. What Nyerere used to tell us, kiongozi kazi yake ni kuinua maisha ya wale anaowaongoza. That's the saying of Nyerere. So our leaders have failed because they are clueless. So every year you are sending 250,000 professionals whom we have borrowed a lot of money to educate. What do you think will happen after 5, 10 years? A country will have a people who cannot even produce a pen. And that is a danger sign. We are not moving forward, we are going backward. Look at Cuba. Cuba is sending the professionals at a fee. It is a government to government. Say, we are sending you this technician for 2 years, this lecturer or this doctor. You are going to pay him this to sustain him. His monthly salary
even this was
to the government. Nothing like that. No government will ever do that.
But the president has clearly stated they have signed bilateral agreements.
Listen, in Kenya we don't own these young men. That is a different policy. That's a different policy where education is absolutely free. And once you go out, you are serving at the interest of the Cuban government. It's unlike where I've struggled on my own.
We are running out of time. We're being kicked out of the studio. Let me start with Daktaris. Your final remarks on this as we wind up the short program we have had. But we do understand they'll be coming back later. But your brief remarks.
Mine is to give our youth materialism basics. Not making them to be like slaves in their own country. To me, I am not championing issue of creating jobs in Europe and taking our youths from one step to another in Europe. But mine is very clear that if we can access whatever we want to go to do in Europe here in Kenya, then it will be better enough, because that one now we are empowering them and we are transforming their lives. Yes.
Okay. Daktari?
Abdas is the visit to United States by our president has raised a lot of expectation for Kenyans. And we are hoping that we will come up with great goodies from America that will going to transform and change this nation to the betterment of where it is today. The other thing that is very crucial is that I think we have talked about several times on human capital. And as he has put it, my friend here, I think human capital is very sensitive.
Okay.
And in Western countries where people go and look for employment, after 5 years or 10 years, you are given a citizenship and you no longer belong to this nation. You can opt to live there as a citizen of that nation, or remain with dual citizenship. And we know there are quite a number of Kenyans who are living in Europe and many even in America. And therefore, I think ours is that let's focus on how best we can create jobs locally.
Okay.
As much as we advocate for our youth to also gain opportunities outside this country. But primarily, our focus should be in country and must create jobs here.
Okay, gentlemen, you need to allow me to put a cap to this conversation because our able team of Darubini needs to come and inform Kenyans what has been happening here in the country and beyond our borders. That is Dr. Isaac Hassan, a governance expert.
Thank you.
Mr. Stephen Oko, a law and governance expert. Thank you so much for coming in. And then finally, Dr. Shadrack Okindo, a law and governance expert. Asanteni sana kwa kuja. And of course, tuwazi kupisha wenzetu kutoka Darubini. You can see even my Swahili is on point. Coming up is Gladys Mangai and Ahmed Juma Malo, who will inform you on what is happening here in the country and beyond our borders, as we also do anticipate both heads of state, that is President William Ruto and President Joe Biden, to address the world when what they have been able to agree, given that currently they are having bilateral talks. For now, we need to put a cap on this particular conversation. My co-anchor is Brian Muraru. Good evening for now.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Wiki hii kwenye Mkulima, tutafuga mbuzi mjini.
Ukizingira shamba yako